There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to the Left Speaks. My name is Chris. I will be your host. And today I am here to tell you the truth about American involvement in Afghanistan, why we went, why we're leaving, why it's overdue, and the one thing, in my opinion, that we need to make sure that we do on our exit. In case you have not heard the news, President Biden has announced in the last couple of weeks that we will be fully withdrawn from Afghanistan on September the 11th of this year. That is the date which ultimately began or provided the cause for our involvement in Afghanistan in the first place. For the older members of my audience, there's going to be a lot of historical context provided, a lot of which you are familiar with, some of which is not pleasant to watch. This is necessary because we have been involved in Afghanistan for 20 years, which means that there are soldiers who are 18 years old who are in a country that were not alive at the time that the September the 11th attacks happened. We're also going to go into Afghani perspective on us being there, why we're leaving, their concerns on why we're leaving, and what, if anything, we should do to mitigate some of those concerns. Independent Thought, welcome in. I appreciate you being here. For those who don't know, Independent Thought is a podcaster. You can find his episodes on Spotify, covers politics, does a very good job. I've listened to a few episodes. I'll also be on one of his episodes upcoming. And yes, I agree with you. It is about time that we leave Afghanistan. Before we jump into Afghanistan, This is also your reminder that it has been 6 months and 5 days since the insurrection attempt at the Capitol, as incited by former President Donald Trump, for which there have still been no real consequences. On that note, we're going to dive into September the 11th, 2001.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
Dan Whitaker from Washington. I am in a situation with American 11, a possible hijack.
What's going on, Betty? The aircraft is erratic again. Problem very erratic. Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? Betty?
A plane just What? The 737?
What?
Like the World Trade
Who are you
Center.
talking to?
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
United 175, New York. We have some problems over here right now. We might have a hijack over here, 2 of them.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well, it's not looking good. I just want you to know it absolutely fuck you. I want you to do good. Go have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I'll see you later, Jessica. Bye, babe.
What are those people going to do? All the elevators are blocked out.
Oh my God. So both towers are now.
Okay, I got an aircraft 6 miles east of the White House.
Crystal City, just north of Crystal City.
Just to the north of your town.
Yeah, stop all departures.
Pentagon just got hit. Show for me then. God damn it, I can't even protect my NCA.
United 93, that traffic for you is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370.
Negative contact, we're looking United 93.
United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the center ident.
I got that bit to dock. Keep remaining to be. You have the ball, boys.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
We're 56865. We have, I believe it is a Boeing 757. Can you see him up there, sir?
That's confirmed. It looks like he's rocking his wings.
Roger.
He's rocking back and forth.
We're 56865. I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 93, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yeah,
Down?
somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Sean, it's me. I just want to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and we just wanted you to know that I love you always.
At number 2 World Trade Center, right. Ladies and students in the walking. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad.
I'm on the 83rd floor. I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die.
Liv, say your prayers. We're going to think positive because you got to help each other get off the floor.
I'm gonna die.
A new type of war. That's what it is.
Those are the terrorist attacks on our country on September the 11th, 2001. World Trade Center, 2 towers that you saw, part of the New York City skyline, were destroyed. Pentagon was attacked. Civilian planes were hijacked by terrorists, part of Al-Qaeda, as we later found out. They were given rudimentary training in how to fly, took pilot lessons, private pilot lessons, and used box cutters and other assorted bladed weapons and the threat of a bomb, as you heard, on several different flights to basically take command, take control of the civilian airliners and turn them into weapons. They flew them into the 2 towers, and a lot of Americans died that day. We were not expecting this. We had no idea what was going on at first. I was in military school at the time. I had cadets under my command who had parents in the air that day. The first one, when it hit the first tower, everybody kind of assumed it was an accident, a terrible accident, but an accident nonetheless. When the second one hit, we knew it wasn't an accident at that point, but we still had no idea who was doing it, why, what the goal was. And for those who don't remember or who weren't alive, you need to try to remember or imagine friends and family members trying to get a hold of anybody that they knew that was taking a flight that day. Because we didn't know what planes had been taken. I mean, this could have been a just New York thing. Could have been a New York and Washington, D.C. thing. It could have been an attack across the entire country. We had no idea. Could have been worldwide. We honestly had no idea what was going on. We were caught completely flat-footed, which is a different story. So we had a lot of work to do after this was over, both in terms of recovery and in terms of figuring out who attacked us. And some of the things we did after this were misguided, in my opinion, like the Patriot Act. Some of these things that we did afterwards were more effective than others, like the TSA, which is not a very effective organization. I think they've improved to the point where they finally only fail 70% of their own tests. But it makes people feel safe. Security theater, if you will. And we figured out who was responsible for these attacks. Who had provided the funding, the money, the motivation, the means. It was a man named Osama bin Laden, organization called Al-Qaeda. And they were housed, hiding out, given space to roam, operate, plan, in a nation called Afghanistan. Between the Middle East and India, most people in this country never heard of Osama bin Laden. Guilty. Had no clue where Afghanistan even was. Not guilty. I was at least aware of where Afghanistan was. But they knew that we'd been attacked completely unexpectedly, out of the blue, and from the average civilian's point of view, completely unprovoked, without warning. Similar to Pearl Harbor. Again, from the average civilian's point of view. And they knew one thing. We need to go get the son of a bitches that attacked us without provocation, without warning, and without honor. This was not a battlefield attack. This was a terrorist attack. They were directly attacking civilians. And that was the mood at the time. And that's what launched our foray into Afghanistan. We were going to go in there. We were going to get Osama bin Laden. We were going to destroy Al-Qaeda. And those were our stated objectives. You don't have to take my word for it. That's from former President George Bush.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
Like I said, the whole nation was grieving, angry, demanding justice. And we were going to go after him.
You're not a dish. You're a man. Most
gotta love the commercials in serious moments.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime. We are joined in this operation by our staunch friend, Great Britain. Other close friends, including Canada, Australia, Germany, and France, have pledged forces as the operation unfolds. More than 40 countries in the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and across Asia have granted air transit or landing rights. Many more have shared intelligence. We are supported by the collective will of the world. More than 2 weeks ago, I gave Taliban leaders a series of clear and specific demands. Close terrorist training camps, hand over leaders of the al-Qaeda network, and return all foreign nationals, including American citizens unjustly detained in your country. None of these demands were met, and now the Taliban will pay a price. By destroying camps and disrupting communications, we will make it more difficult for the terror network to train new recruits and coordinate their evil plans. Initially, the terrorists may burrow deeper into caves and other entrenched hiding places. Our military action is also designed to clear the way for sustained, comprehensive, and relentless operations to drive them out and bring them to justice. At the same time, the oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies. As we strike military targets, we will also drop food, medicine, and supplies to the starving and suffering men and women and children of Afghanistan. The United States of America is a friend to the Afghan people, and we are the friends of almost 1 billion worldwide who practice the Islamic faith. The United States of America is an enemy of those who aid terrorists and of the barbaric criminals who profane a great religion by committing murder in its name. This military action is a part of our campaign against terrorism, another front in a war that has already been joined through diplomacy, intelligence, the freezing of financial assets, and the arrests of known terrorists by law enforcement agents in 38 countries. Given the nature and reach of our enemies, we will win this conflict by the patient accumulation of successes, by meeting a series of challenges with determination and will and purpose. Today we focus on Afghanistan, but the battle is broader. Every nation has a choice to make. In this conflict, there is no neutral ground. If any government sponsors the outlaws and killers of innocents, they have become outlaws and murderers themselves, and they will take that lonely path at their own peril. I'm speaking to you today from the treaty room of the White House, a place where American presidents have worked for peace. We're a peaceful nation. Yet as we have learned so suddenly and so tragically, there can be no peace in a world of sudden terror. In the face of today's new threat, the only way to pursue peace is to pursue those who threaten it. We did not ask for this mission, but we will fulfill it. The name of today's military operation is Enduring Freedom. we defend not only our precious freedoms, but also the freedom of people everywhere to live and raise their children free from fear. I know many Americans feel fear today, and our government is taking strong precautions. All law enforcement and intelligence agencies are working aggressively around America, around the world, and around the clock. At my request, many governors have activated the National Guard to strengthen airport security. We have called up reserves to reinforce our military capability and strengthen the protection of our homeland. In the months ahead, our patience will be one of our strengths. Patience with the long waits that will result from tighter security. Patience in understanding that it will take time to achieve our goals. Patience in all the sacrifices that may come. Today, those sacrifices are being made by members of our armed forces who now defend us so far from home and by their proud and worried families. A commander-in-chief sends America's sons and daughters into a battle in a foreign land only after the greatest care and a lot of prayer. We ask a lot of those who wear our uniform. We ask them to leave their loved ones, to travel great distances, to risk injury, even to be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. They are dedicated. They are honorable. They represent the best of our country, and we are grateful. To all the men and women in our military, every sailor, every soldier, every airman, every Coast Guardsman, every Marine, I say this: your mission is defined, your objectives are clear, your goal is just. You have my full confidence, and you will have every tool you need to carry out your duty. I recently received a touching letter that says a lot about the state of America in these difficult times. A letter from a 4th grade girl with a father in the military. As much as I don't want my dad to fight, she wrote, I'm willing to give him to you. This is a precious gift, the greatest she could give. This young girl knows what America is all about. Since September 11, an entire generation of young Americans has gained new understanding of the value of freedom and its cost in duty and in sacrifice. The battle is now joined on many fronts. We will not waver. We will not tire. We will not falter. And we will not fail. Peace and freedom will prevail. Thank you. May God continue to bless America.
We had never had an attack on American soil like this. The closest we had had was a bombing of a federal building in Oklahoma City by Timothy McVeigh, a domestic terrorist, homegrown. President Bush, as much as I dislike the man, was not exaggerating in that case. For those of y'all who were very young back then, like Ricky and Dash Mickey, everybody was ready to sign up, was ready to deploy, was ready to enlist, was ready to, like I said earlier, go get the sons of bitches that hurt us. We're not talking about an attack on a military installation. And if you had been one of the ones who had had a mom or a grandmother taking a flight that day, or your friend had had a mother or a grandmother flying that day, and you had been glued to the television trying to wonder if your family was safe, this affected you personally. Prior to this event, America didn't really have a defined enemy, which we had pretty much had since we joined World War II. You know, first it was the Axis powers, Germany and Italy and Japan. We've got to beat the Nazis. And then we went straight from that into the Cold War. We've got to stop communism. We've got to stop the Soviet Union. And then we had some minor conflicts during the Cold War. I consider them fairly major, but no world wars, right? You had Korea. You had Vietnam. And then the Berlin Wall comes down. Cold War ends. We start downsizing our military. We had some minor engagements. Bosnia. Things of that nature. But we hadn't been attacked on American soil, unless you count embassies overseas, since really December 7th, 1941. So I can't stress enough, especially for those who don't remember this event, how shocking, upsetting, and ultimately motivating these attacks were. Everybody knew somebody that had been affected by this or thought they were going to be affected. Because when that plane was in the air, if you had a relative that was flying, even if they weren't on that flight, you were concerned. It was real to you. That meant it was real to your teacher or your friend. It wasn't just some event that happened overseas somewhere. And President Bush there left a bit of context out of his speech that we'll clarify here. So Osama bin Laden, who we'll look at a brief overview of here in a minute, was in Afghanistan. That much we knew. And he was the one that was responsible for these attacks. That much we knew. We went to the Afghan government, the people in charge of Afghanistan. That's the Taliban. They'll come around again in the future. That's who we're fighting now. And said, hey, we want him. We want all the leaders of Al-Qaeda. We want anybody directly involved in this, or we're coming to get them. And Afghanistan essentially said, what's your proof that he was involved? And at that point, we said, fuck it, we're coming to get him. And in the speech, as President Bush made clear there, we're going into Afghanistan. We're going to get Osama bin Laden. We're going to get those responsible. We are going to destroy these terrorist training facilities. And we are going to deny their use in the future. The third one becomes the problem. Because America typically doesn't do long wars very well. That's why we're finally leaving Afghanistan after 20 years. Going in and getting somebody, going in and destroying facilities, going in and knocking out a military. We've got a good history of that. Going and staying for 8, 10, 20 years and having the conflict ultimately resolve the way we want it to resolve, not so good of a history with that. You want us to go beat the German army in World War II? World War I? We're very good at that. You want us to go stop an insurgency in Vietnam? That's where we tend to struggle. Nation building is not hard, or is very hard, and it's not the same thing. Well, if you're going to stay somewhere and deny the use of that ground to an enemy, that means you're either going to occupy all of it, or you've got to build a friendly ally there. And that's why we're still there 20 years later, and as you will see, ultimately unsuccessful in that venture. So, who was Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden's journey toward jihad and global terrorism began in Saudi Arabia in 1957. He was the 17th of more than 50 children of a self-made billionaire.
Osama was more religious than the rest of us. He did not like to listen to music or to watch TV.
Most of his brothers were educated abroad, but Osama stayed in Saudi Arabia. Then, in 1979, Soviet troops invaded Afghanistan, and Osama bin Laden found his calling, helping the Afghans fight their jihad, holy war, against the communists. First, he raised money, used expertise gained from the family's construction business. Then, he took up arms.
I talked to eyewitnesses of the battles that Osama bin Laden was involved in, and whatever your views about him, he's not a coward.
After the Soviets were chased out, bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda, the base, and turned toward a global jihad. The new enemy was America, which ironically had funded the Afghan resistance against the Soviets. When Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, bin Laden went to the Saudi royal family and offered his followers to defend the holy sites of Mecca and Medina.
So this is a key thing to know about what's going on. The Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan in 1979. And it was their version of Vietnam. The ongoing, never-ending war where you're fighting everybody in the population in this rural area where people can hide and blend in, and you're not fighting a conventional military on the battlefield. And the United States at the time, the enemy of the Soviet Union, had sent tons of weapons and money to the people fighting the Soviet Union. Not Osama bin Laden directly, but he was on the same side as those guys. Now, allies of convenience. We're both enemies of the Soviet Union. We're not fighting them directly, but we'll help you fight them. Because if you hurt them, you're hurting our enemy. That means you're providing weapons, you're providing training, etc., etc., etc. Soviet involvement in Afghanistan didn't end very well. Drug on and on and on. Same thing as our Vietnam. Hell, we even had movies in this country, major blockbusters, showing support for the Afghan insurgents. Rambo, I believe it was the third one, was about John Rambo, the main character, going over to Afghanistan to rescue his mentor from a Soviet prison. And he works with the Afghan insurgents, the Osama bin Ladens, if you will. Now, as tends to happen, when the Soviets finally said, we're done, and they left, the groups that had been fighting the Soviets and united in that regard started fighting each other to see who was going to be in charge of Afghanistan after the Soviets left, because there was this big power vacuum. The Taliban ultimately win. Osama bin Laden obviously gets to stay because, you know, he'd been on the same side as them and hadn't really fought them when they tried to come to power. And they're both religious fundamentalists. When the United States, later in the early 90s, goes into Saudi Arabia to take back Kuwait from Iraq, Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. You don't need to know the specifics of that, except for the fact that the two holiest cities of Islam are in Saudi Arabia. And Osama bin Laden, religious fundamentalist of Islam, considered the fact that non-believers, the United States, being in Saudi Arabia, which housed the holiest cities of Islam, was a form of essentially blasphemy. And that's when we became his enemy. It's not like we went out after him or anything else. That's what did it.
Instead, the Saudis invited in U.S. troops.
When U.S. troops were placed in Saudi Arabia as a result of Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, that was a kind of turning point for Osama.
Bin Laden was kicked out of Saudi Arabia, spent several years in Sudan, where he started training camps for Al-Qaeda. He was booted out of there and fled to Afghanistan, where in 1997 he did an interview with CNN, making it clear he was targeting the U.S. unless it got its troops out of Saudi Arabia.
We have focused declaration of jihad on striking at the U.S. soldiers inside Arabia, the country of the two holy places, Mecca and Medina.
A year later, bin Laden publicly declared war on the U.S. He wanted it to end its support for Israel, its boycott of Iraq, and to get out of Saudi Arabia.
Jihad is mentioned here. It is to mean carrying the weapon and to kill those Americans.
Weeks later, Al-Qaeda launched suicide attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. U.S. plans to grab bin Laden in Afghanistan never made it to President Clinton's desk, and the emboldened Al-Qaeda launched another attack in 2000 on the USS Cole, killing a number of sailors. Then 9/11, attacks inside the United States. Later, bin Laden would gloat that the plan succeeded beyond his imagination.
They were overjoyed when the first plane hit the building, so I said to them, "Be patient."
But bin Laden, who had been contemptuous of America, had overreached. The U.S. invaded, and bin Laden became a man on the run. He was last seen by people not within his inner circle at the Battle of Tora Bora in November and December of 2001, and believed to have been wounded there by the U.S. bombing. But he escaped. Intelligence officials believed he was likely in Pakistan. From then on, bin Laden communicated with his followers online and through numerous audio and video messages, attempting to keep himself relevant even in hiding, all the time warning the West that Al-Qaeda would attack again.
We want to restore our Islamic nation's freedom. Just as you violate our security, we violate yours.
Bin Laden's legacy, I think, is a kind of an ideological way of looking at the world, which he's communicated to a lot of people, which I don't think is going to go away.
But now, finally, news that the world's most wanted man has been killed.
Those messages to his supporters, they were constantly on our news too. We knew that we hadn't gotten the son of a bitch responsible yet. Again, it's not like you're going in and fighting some major army, right? It's not knock out the army, find the presidential palace, and then, take the king out of there or take the dictator out of there. You got one guy hiding in a bunch of caves. Needing this much of an internet connection to drop and move to the next cave. Going in and taking Afghanistan wasn't much of a problem. Finding Osama bin Laden, different ballgame. Now, remember, Osama bin Laden was not in charge of Afghanistan. He was just housed there. That's where he was, essentially. Be like, I live in Las Vegas, but I'm not in charge of Las Vegas, right? The Taliban was who was in charge. So who are they?
Hi. Yeah. This is
the Taliban. They've been fighting the government and its allies in Afghanistan for 20 years. Today, they seem stronger than ever.
The Taliban have adapted their tactics. They've gotten more brutal.
And now the Americans are going home.
It's time to end the forever war.
Biden wants his troops out by September 11th, and that could strengthen the Taliban even more. So who exactly are the Taliban? How is it that they have so much power? And why are people worried they'll take over Afghanistan again? To understand the Taliban, you need to know what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s. Afghan guerrillas called the Mujahideen fought a Soviet occupation for 9 years. They even got money and weapons from the CIA. In 1989, the Soviets pulled out, and the next few years were pretty chaotic. By 1992, there was a full-blown civil war with tribal leaders fighting for power. 2 years later, a militia called the Taliban started getting attention. Many of its members had studied in conservative religious schools in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan, and some of them had also fought as Mujahideen. And they had their own plans for the country.
The people were so frustrated with this lawlessness, and the Taliban came marching along from Kandahar to city to city to city, saying, we're gonna make the cities safe for you again.
By 1996, the Taliban had seized the capital. They declared Afghanistan an Islamic emirate and started imposing their own strict interpretation of Islamic law.
They were like, you can't watch movies, you can't listen to music, women can't go to school, and other than doctors, they can't go to work. You have to wear a certain type of clothes, you have to have a certain kind of beard, it just became more and more restrictive.
Then 9/11 happened. The US was after Al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden, who was hiding out in Afghanistan with the Taliban's help. The Taliban said they wanted proof he was behind the attack, and when they refused to hand him over immediately, the Americans invaded.
The Taliban will pay a price.
Within a couple of months, the Taliban were forced out of power, and Afghanistan got a new interim government. 3 years later, it got a new constitution, and Hamid Karzai was elected president. While that was...
So in 3 years, you go from a Islamic, conservative, fundamentalist theocracy to congratulations, you have a constitution and a democracy. If you're having problems understanding why we weren't overall successful in Afghanistan, try and imagine in this country, 3 years from now, we're going to be a conservative Islamic theocracy, and how well that would go over with you and the people that you know. Were there people that were repressed under the Taliban? Absolutely. Did they have a lot of support, which is why they won after the Soviets left? Obviously. This is not a one sentence, small change summed up. This is a huge, massive cultural shift that we are trying to enact in this country. Like I said, imagine it the other way around. Imagine if another country had come over here and said, for your own good and for our safety, we're going to make you a conservative Islamic theocracy because we know what's best. Now, I happen to like Western democracy. But when you're trying to change an entire population's opinion and shift the entire culture like that, you need to realize just how difficult that is.
What was going on, the Taliban had regrouped. They wanted foreigners out, and they wanted back in. What followed were years of devastating conflict, and it's still going on. More than 40,000 Afghan civilians killed, at least 64,000 Afghan military and police, and more than 3,500 international soldiers dead. The US alone has spent almost $1 trillion on the war and reconstruction projects. And after all that, Afghanistan is still deeply unstable, and the Taliban are still a force to reckon with.
They're an insurgency fighting international occupation as they see it. They're fighting an illegitimate government in Kabul as they see it. And they're a voice of resistance to, as they see it, return Afghanistan to a more pure Islamic society.
Today, the Taliban have as many as 85,000 full-time fighters and training camps across the country, and the area they control has been growing. Right now, the Taliban control 1/5 of Afghan districts. On top of that, half of all districts are considered contested, which means the Taliban have a strong presence in many of those places too. And they control parts of some major highways.
Whoever controls the roads in Afghanistan, pretty much controls the country. They've managed to basically give people the sense that, wherever you go, you'll have to deal with the Taliban.
They're also well organized. The Taliban's leader is Haibatullah Akhundzada. He heads a council that oversees about a dozen commissions in charge of things like finance, health, and education. Below them are local officials in charge of everyday services. So in a way, the Taliban have set up a parallel state.
So the only correction I will add to that, they didn't set up a parallel state. They may have reset up a parallel state, but they were the state before we came in. If you're wondering why the Taliban has legitimacy in Afghanistan, they were the government. Again, imagine that in 3 years, we had a new government as an Islamic theocracy, and then your congressman or your senator or a general of the army, somebody in government that you recognized, you would still recognize that they knew their area and what they were talking about. We might have knocked out some of these people, but we weren't initially there to get the Taliban. They were in the way of us getting Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. We just kind of decided to stay in Afghanistan until we found Osama bin Laden, for obvious reasons. And as a result of that, we started trying to secure Afghanistan. Wasn't our main mission going in.
They even run their own courts, which can be pretty popular among Afghans.
Justice has been a huge gap in Afghanistan, and where the state courts have failed, these Sharia courts are able to come into communities who may even be reticent to support the Taliban, but they offer justice.
All that control has also made them rich. According to Taliban members and a UN committee, they make close to $1.5 billion a year. They've always made a lot of money from growing opium poppies and the drug trade, but they found even more ways to generate income. Last year, they made millions from mining and trading minerals and even producing methamphetamine. They also have their own tax collection system and receive funding from abroad, although suspected sources like Pakistan and Iran deny it.
Sick of red, itchy mosquito bites? This genius college student just solved a $210 million.
Over the years, the international community has tried to get the Taliban and the Afghan government talking, or at least to talk about talking. There was even a meeting in the Maldives at one point. And during a brief Eid ceasefire in 2018, Taliban and Afghan soldiers were seen mingling in Kabul, even praying together. But overall, peace negotiations haven't achieved much.
The Ghani government has been incredibly antagonistic and sees the Taliban as a real existential threat to everything that they represent.
The Taliban have been quite adamant on their demand that they want the re-establishment of their regime that was toppled by the US intervention.
The question now is, what will happen when the roughly 10,000 US and NATO soldiers leave? Will the Afghan government be able to survive? And what will the Taliban do? Well, the prospects for peace and stability aren't looking great. Even while peace talks have been going on, almost 1,800 Afghan civilians have been killed or injured in the first 3 months of this year. That's almost 30% more than last year. There's also been a wave of assassinations that people blame on the Taliban.
Targeted killings continue. Civilian government workers, employees, but also activists and journalists.
It's to make people feel less and less safe, less and less secure, to sort of send back the message repeatedly that your government is not protecting you.
Afghans are already asking themselves what life might be like if the Taliban take over again. Will they rip up the Constitution, which protects basic human rights?
Will women be able to travel without a male guardian? Will women be able to be judges? Will a woman be able to run for president? There's a lot that is ambiguous and unknown.
In a New York Times op-ed, the Taliban tried to clear things up, saying they want to build an Islamic system where the rights of women that are granted by Islam, from the right to education to the right to work, are protected. And right now, there are some places under Taliban control where girls are in school, but not everywhere.
It's really localized. I mean, in some areas, we know that the local commanders are a bit more flexible when it comes to women's education. In some areas, they are not at all.
So how much support is there for the Taliban? Well, according to a major public opinion study done in 2019, 85% of people said they had no sympathy for them.
I've traveled to a large proportion of this country. The vast majority of people I speak to don't have a favorable view of the Taliban.
و اما اون طالبه که در ذهن من کابوس بد و خوابهای شیرین کودکانه مرا به یک خاطرات تلخ مبدل ساخته هرگز نمیپذیرم.
People may not like them, but the Taliban know what they want, and they've shown that they're in it for the long haul. So far, their strategy seems to have worked.
So their strategy is essentially to outlast us. Because remember, they were in charge before we came in. And while 85% of the Afghan people may not support the Taliban, if they don't fight the Taliban, then the Taliban is going to win again. But I can't stress enough, this is not what the United States went into Afghanistan to do. We did not go into Afghanistan to create a Western democracy. I'm not going to play the whole speech, but we got him. We got Osama bin Laden 10 years ago under President Obama. Ten years later, we still have soldiers in Afghanistan. As you just saw, because that video is less than a couple of months old, from Al Jazeera, tried to get a pro-Islamic source. We don't have to worry about civil war erupting in Afghanistan. It's already there. They control 15, I think it was, districts. Another half are contested between them and the local government. Imagine if 15 states in the United States were not under federal government control. We're not under U.S. government control. And the other half, or half of the rest, were contested. That is civil war. It's already going on. It has been for quite some time. Is it likely to get worse when we leave? Yes. I hope that makes you feel hilarious, Mr. Eat Pills from Twitch. Do you have anything substantive to contribute to the conversation? Or are you just triggered by race? So now we know who the Taliban are. We know who Osama bin Laden is. We understand the backstory of September the 11th. Why the United States went in and over there in the first place. Let's look at why this hasn't worked. As explained mostly in the story of a road.
Whoa, Susan!
City, Kandahar. It was the cornerstone of the U.S. strategy to rebuild Afghanistan after the invasion in 2001. It cost over $200 million to build, and hundreds of lives were lost defending it. Despite all of that, the Kabul to Kandahar highway today is broken. A 2016 audit report found that the road was beyond repair and needed to be rebuilt. And if it becomes impassable, the central government will collapse. To understand how a road this significant and this costly can be falling apart, you have to ask, where did the US go wrong in Afghanistan? Just weeks after 9/11, the US invaded Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda had planned the attacks. They were sheltered by the Taliban, who controlled the Afghan government at the time. Both groups were driven out of Kabul in a matter of months, so the US strategy soon shifted from combat to stabilizing and rebuilding the country. But Afghanistan's a difficult place to control and rebuild. It's mountainous and mostly rural. The population is fractured among several ethnic groups, and local communities often operated autonomously.
Look at how many different groups and the terrain of Afghanistan. This is what you're talking about, trying to unify and control. A lot of mountains, a lot of middle of nowhere.
To make matters worse, there were only 50 kilometers of paved road in 2002, which meant most of these communities were isolated. The US decided to change that by rebuilding the Ring Road that was partially built by the Soviet Union in the 60s but had been destroyed by decades of war. Starting with the Kabul to Kandahar section, the US and several other countries pledged $1.5 billion to the Ring Road. It would run in a 3,200-kilometer loop, connecting Afghanistan's 4 biggest cities, essentially tying these communities together. And it was showing promise. Trade circulated through more places, and medical services reached more people. It gave the new government in Kabul more legitimacy around the country. The Ring Road also allowed the US and NATO military to send troops and supplies around the country faster, so they could keep the Taliban in check.
Where the roads end in Afghanistan, the Taliban begin. In other words, roads promote enterprise. Enterprise provides hope. Hope is what defeats this ideology of darkness.
But the US didn't finish the job. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq, and Afghanistan became second priority. Funding, reconstruction resources, and experienced leadership, including generals and diplomats, were all diverted to the war in Iraq. The Ring Road was far from complete, yet reconstruction funding was cut by $1.2 billion a few years later.
So that's a big part of the story. We go in to get Osama bin Laden. We go in to get Al-Qaeda. We decide we got to knock the Taliban out of the way to do it. We figure since we're there to secure the Taliban and secure the area and make sure there's no more terrorist camps, we're going to basically nation build in Afghanistan. And then we send all of our best people, combat leaders, diplomats, a large chunk of the funding, 38%, it's almost half, and our focus away from this nation we decided we're going to start building and over to a different one. Ricky the Great One, that's actually hilarious that the U.S. ended up trying to rebuild a road that the USSR built. I agree. Hilariously bad. Let's repeat the strategy that didn't work for the Soviet Union over the course of their 10 years there. Mod, you can go ahead and delete that comment if you want. It doesn't add anything. That's just somebody who's probably 14 and thinks it's edgy. But don't time them out just in case they decide they have anything substantive to contribute. Even 14-year-olds have to grow up sometime.
The U.S. preoccupation with Iraq gave the Taliban an opening to return, and they seized it. When you look at the Taliban activity in the region from 2004 through 2009, you can see it escalate. Draw the ring road, and you can see where those activities are concentrated. They set up ambushes, laid roadside bombs, took hostages, killed U.S. soldiers and road construction crews. By 2008, the Taliban had taken back significant territory, especially in the south and east along the Kabul to Kandahar highway. Afghanistan was in a full-blown insurgency.
Afghanistan is not lost, but for several years it has moved backwards. There's no imminent threat of the government being overthrown, but the Taliban has gained momentum. In short, the status quo is not sustainable.
In 2009, President Barack Obama decided to recommit to the war in Afghanistan. He sent thousands of troops in what was called the Surge. The US and NATO made some progress in the south, but it quickly became clear that the Taliban would not be easily defeated. The more troops deployed to Afghanistan, the more the Taliban launched attacks. With the military struggling to clear territory, it became nearly impossible to rebuild roads as the Taliban continued to attack road crews.
The degraded security environment has made this the most dangerous project our company has attempted. And we have suffered 21 killed, 51 wounded, and 4 missing.
This forced construction companies to hire security, which caused budgets to skyrocket. Like this road from Kos to Paktia, which cost almost $5 million per mile, mostly because of security. But 18 months later, time was up. President Obama announced that he'd start bringing troops back.
After this initial reduction, our troops will continue coming home at a steady pace as Afghan security forces move into the lead. Our mission will change from combat to support.
As the U.S. troops withdrew, they left behind oversight of infrastructure projects, including roads. In 2012, USAID cut funding for road construction. And even after the U.S. and partnering countries spent $3 billion on it, the ring road was never completed. Road building and maintenance became the responsibility of the Afghan government, which was crippled by corruption. Experts estimate that billions of dollars have been lost to corruption in Afghanistan. In 2015, with only about 11,000 U.S. troops in country, mostly in the major cities, the Taliban swept back through Afghanistan. In 2017, they controlled almost half the country. That's more territory than they've had since 2001. And that includes large sections of the ring road. And that's one of the reasons why the road is in dire shape. According to a 2016 inspection, 20% of the roads are destroyed and 80% continue to deteriorate. The U.S. has no plans to give rebuilding Afghanistan a third chance. In 2017, President Trump committed more troops, but made it very clear,
we are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
As the ring road continues to deteriorate, it's no longer a symbol of the U.S. efforts to rebuild Afghanistan. Instead, it serves as a reminder of the job that was never finished.
Chips and Gravy again. Welcome in. I don't think I've seen you here before. Regardless, if why you left was picking September the 11th as a leaving date, a good idea. I think that was a symbolic and political decision, obviously. personally think we should have left when the military said they would be ready to leave. Best time would have been 10 years ago after we got Osama bin Laden, personally, in my opinion. Do I think it made a huge difference? No, I don't. Yes, Dash Mickey, that is the date to leave Afghanistan. That's the date set by President Biden. The military was actually pulling out too fast. They had to slow it down to meet that September the 11th guideline. But yes, I think that was entirely a political and symbolic decision. From Dash Mickey, I agree, but symbolism doesn't mean much when it's been years. I agree. I think sooner would have been better than later. But there are people that are going to disagree on both sides of this. Some people, the symbolism will be important. I don't think it's worth any soldier's life, personally. Banana Raptor God, been changed to August 31st. Really, I hadn't seen that yet. Thank you. And welcome back. So again, for those who are concerned about Afghanistan erupting into civil war, we don't even have control of the road that we were planning to build but never completed around the country. You notice that Taliban controls 20% of the sections of that road. The rest of it's deteriorating. There already is civil war there. They may not be openly shooting at each other right now, but if the federal government doesn't control a large section of the territory, there's already some form of civil combat going on there. Hardwood and Sock, welcome in. Dash Mickey, why would it matter how fast we got out of there? Because you have soldiers potentially in danger zones when you're leaving. Now, here's the problem with leaving too soon.
Looking for feedback? 95%.
Ads, I'm going to win.
زمونږ د راتګ نه مخکې 20 دقیقې مخکې دوی برق قطع کړه مونږ باندې برق قطع شو په دوی خو تللي وو کله چې میدان یوې حمید کرزي ته رسېدلي وو د دې خوا نه ورته زنګ ووهل شو چې برق قطع شو هغه ورته چې مونږ میدان یوې حمید کرزي کې نشست کړی دی
Banana Raptor God, we had controlled most of the ring road in 2020. Now the Taliban has taken control of it again following the withdrawal. That is not what we have just seen. We have not consistently controlled most of the ring road since we invaded Afghanistan. In fact, it was never fully built. So you DM me a source on Twitter, brother, because I have not seen that information.
After we received some rumor that the Americans left the background, we increased our intelligence report, and finally by 7 o'clock morning we understood that it was confirmed that they are already left the background.
So if it takes us a little bit longer to get a clear handover plan, I don't think it should, but I don't think we should be evacuating bases, the largest air base in Afghanistan that we're planning to hand over to our allies, the Afghan government, without basically letting them know. And then 2 hours later, they figure it out on their own. Now, if we honestly don't think that the Afghan government can handle it, that the Taliban are going to win anyway once we leave, then I would at least destroy, sabotage all the equipment before we leave. Leaving the equipment in good working order doesn't make sense unless you're going to leave it to your allies. And if you're going to leave it to your allies, you should probably let them know that you're leaving so they can come secure it. Those two things don't seem to go together to me. Hardwood and Sock. Thank goodness we're finally leaving. I still feel that we will find another reason to stay there by the deadline. Dash Mickey, for as long as I remember we've been there. I think our country is ready to have our people home. Happy Merchant, hello, welcome in. I appreciate you being here. I don't think I've seen you before. Thanks for dropping by. Hardwood and Sock, I agree, but I don't think the Pentagon wants our people home. They've been looking for any excuse for us to stay there. I believe, and I don't have the source handy, the same general that was in charge of our withdrawal from Iraq and drawdown in Iraq is in charge of our withdrawal and drawdown in Afghanistan right now. I think we'll probably have an embassy there, but I think we're pretty much out at this point. Now, we've been there for 20 years.
And finally tonight.
And I thought it would be interesting, after 20 years, to have a look at whether the Afghan people know why we're there. So there was a reporter who went over there and interviewed Afghan individuals, Afghani civilians. Obviously, he was embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps.
People's lives.
The following day, I get a first opportunity to ask a couple of young Afghan men what they know about 9/11.
Yeah. No, they never heard about this.
Yeah? Can you show them a few more? And can you ask them, do they know where it is even?
See, we're farmers. Like every time we're just working in our field, so we do nothing. We don't know about anything else about the world. We don't know, so that's because we're a farmer. We never heard about anything else about the world.
Adam, if you don't mind, I got a couple more questions for
Sure.
these guys. Just wanted to show them with these pictures. As you know, we're here for your security, but your security is tied to our security. By keeping this area safe, keeping your family safe, we keep our family safe, and that's the reason that we're here. Big time motorcycle coming through.
The two young men had clearly never heard of 9/11, but maybe the elders at the local shul would have more to say.
Yeah. No, they didn't see it. He's saying I just can see the smoke from the buildings, and that's it. That's the only thing I can say. When you guys show this picture, that guy saying it's, I think that was a Kabul.
If I had just gotten here, I would have been surprised, but having been here now for 6 months, I'm not. This is pretty much the Stone Age is where we are.
And what did you think about their reactions?
Oh, I thought it was fascinating. The guy who said it was Kabul was clearly had never been to Kabul. It just shows you how isolated they are, even in their own country. It was nice to go from Iraq to then here. It was a lot easier to understand, why you're here and bring yourself. You have that picture. You can always pick up the picture to remind yourself, okay, this is why we're here. I don't like looking at those pictures. I haven't looked at those pictures. I've intentionally avoided those pictures for 10 years now. So to see them pulled out here and to see the Afghans looking at it in this context while wearing the uniform and carrying the rifle it took me back.
The Americans saying we're gonna help you. They destroy one building and they destroy us how many buildings? And they say we're gonna help you. Where is the help?
I do sympathize or understand what some of them were saying is, yeah, your buildings were knocked down, but how many of our buildings have been knocked down? And so when you can't even feed yourself or house yourself, how are you going to care about somebody 6,000 miles away? So I can understand that.
Amazingly, in a country where for 10 years a war has been fought with 9/11 as its root cause and justification, it turns out not only were the villagers oblivious to 9/11, but so were the Afghan police, and even some of the translators working with the US military.
We'd been in Afghanistan for 10 years at that point. Our own allies really didn't know why in the hell we were there. Translators, Afghani police, random civilians while soldiers are on patrol. And you have to admit that the gentleman, that Afghani civilian that posed the question, I'm sorry your buildings got knocked down, but a lot of ours have been too, kind of raises a point. Hardwood and Sock, I've heard an excuse that we need to stay there for women's rights. I do think women's rights in Afghanistan, if the Taliban are successful, will be seriously repressed. We didn't go into Afghanistan to build a Western democracy. That was not our stated goal going in. If the Afghani people want to fight back against the Taliban, I am okay with helping support them non-militarily in that goal. But that is their fight to stand up and fight, in my opinion. Dash Mickey, isn't that due to religious beliefs? But if it is, and even if I don't agree, it's their religion. The people who get repressed would disagree with that. But I understand where you're coming from. As far as I'm concerned, it's their country. Chips and gravy again. Yes, it is, I believe, but... Oh, it caught me. Once you're in Afghanistan, it's like a finger trap. The more you struggle, the more you're stuck. Do either of you remember September the 11th? He was talking to two chatters. Yes, I personally do remember September the 11th. I was at military school and I had cadets underneath me who had parents and family that were flying that day. They luckily, thank God, were not on those flights, but we didn't know that at the time. And yes, Afghanistan is very much like a finger trap. You are correct in that. And we should have gone in, got who we were after and what we were after, and gotten back out. Chips and gravy, just wondering, I don't think people understand how much that changed things and why. Personally, I came home from school to watch the second plane hit. Yeah, we went over it earlier to provide some context for those who were younger and don't remember it as well. A lot of things changed after September the 11th. A lot of things. My parents left me in school for the full day. Both my parents being in the military, the base was locked down for a while. Yeah, that's from Hardwood and Sock. Dash Mickey, I am more remember the day we got bin Laden. I don't remember if he was caught or killed. He was killed. SEAL team raid, if I remember correctly. It was definitely a raid. I think it was the SEALs that were responsible. 90% sure there. I think it was a valid one from Chips and Gravy. Iraq, no, but Afghanistan, yes. However, this is mainly to do with the Arabs and the Pakistanis. I agree with us going into Afghanistan. I don't agree with us staying there to try and build a country. I disagreed with us going into Iraq at the time as well. Dash Mickey, watching the first video made me cry. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and hearing. Yeah, it was a hard time, especially when you were watching it live. Like I said, you're watching it with hindsight, realizing and knowing what's coming and what's happening. When the first one hit, everybody assumed it was an accident, some kind of terrible malfunction, or, you know, something that had gone wrong, not an actual attack. And when the second one hit, that's when the realization began to dawn on everybody that there's going to be more of this. And then the feeling that there was really nothing you individually could do except, you know, hope and or pray that if you had family in the sky, or if your friend's family was in the sky, that they were going to be okay. And that the people in those towers would somehow find a way out in time. But again, to stress, from the local Afghani perspective, they didn't even know 10 years in why this foreign military is there.
But you don't know the history of this event?
No, I have no idea about the history of this.
Have you ever seen these pictures before?
No, I didn't.
In fact, after showing the images to dozens of Afghans, I only found one person who clearly recognized them and could connect them to the US's initial reason for coming to Afghanistan, and that was the police district chief in Marja.
So he says that the Taliban, the terrorists, they attacked to the building of New York and they killed most of the people. They destroyed this building. So that was the reason American force today came in Afghanistan.
But that police chief is an exception. A survey taken in 2010 by the International Council on Security and Development found that 92% of Afghan men in Helmand and other Afghan provinces had no idea what 9/11 was.
%92 had no idea. 92% had no idea why a foreign country had invaded them and stuck around for 10 years. 92%. And they interviewed the men, right? Generally, you're fighters in most cultures, especially over there, Islamic culture. 92%. You would have thought more people would know that in Afghanistan just when you're out on patrol saying, hey, have you seen Osama bin Laden? The guy attacked a couple of our towers, killed thousands of people in our country. That's who we're here for. If only 8% of the local population in an area you're trying to secure even knows why in the hell you're there in the first place, you are not winning the propaganda, information, hearts and minds war. I don't think that needs to be stated, but apparently it does. And that's after 10 years of being on the ground in Afghanistan. Call me crazy, but I think that alone is a missed opportunity. Because once you're there but for 10 years, like Chips and Gravy was saying, it's a finger trap, right? Somewhere in that first 10 years, you would have thought that some general somewhere or some diplomat somewhere would make it a point of trying to get out to the population why you're there in the first place.
Everything in life is a negotiation. Now that American soldiers have all but left Afghanistan, the UN warns the Taliban maintains close ties to Al-Qaeda, and the country could once again become a breeding ground for international terrorists.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
The Taliban, fearing a change in policy, had a clear message for the new US president.
Joe Biden has just been elected. Do you think that could potentially change the situation?
د جو بایدن لپاره د موږ مشران دا ده چې د ټرمپ تګلاره خپله کړو، خپل عسکر وباسي د ملک نه نور د نه ځان خوږي وي نه د خپل ملک اقتصاد خرابوي وي چې هغه بله چاره هم نه لري.
But you're now no longer fighting against American soldiers. You're fighting against people who believe in the same book as you, who are the same religion as you. You're fighting against your brothers.
نو کوم د شرع مطابق قوانین که دا حکومت ومینې موږ د دې سم کوم ستونزه نه لرو. امریکایانو سم کومه ستونزه چې غوره شوې هغه په دې شکل ده چې دی به په موږ غرض نه لري، موږ په دې غرض نه لرو. صرف هغه یوه د وتلو لار هم دوی ته ورکړې ده چې دی په یعنې په امن کې ووځي. دی په لاس جوړ شوی نظام په افغانستان کې اوس چلیږي.
Hardwood and sock, Russia or China, I think, will go in and try to fill the power vacuum after we leave. I don't think Russia will. They've had their experience with Afghanistan, their 10-year war, if I recall correctly, and they're attempting to build the ring road the first time around, you know, the one that we tried to rebuild and failed. My bet is that they learned their lesson. China will probably try and invest economically, but I don't see them really attempting to go in either. There's just not a lot there unless you want to take all the poppies and make heroin, because that's their number one export. Like I said, I don't think we should have been there as long as we were. I completely understand going in the first place, but 20 years?
Message or a threat?
د موږ خبر هم ورته همدا دی، اخطار هم همدا دی. که دا جنگ زیاتوي نو موږ د جنگ او د جهاد لپاره بالکل آماده یو. موږ په جهاد باندې نه ستړي کېږو، په زخمو باندې نه غمجن کېږو، په شهادت باندې نه دردېږو. موږ که شهیدان شوم کامیاب یو، که په ستړي وم کامیاب یو، که په جنگ کې وم کامیاب وو. موږ په فاتحانه توګه کابل ته انشاءالله ننوځو. دا د موږ لار او کامیابي ده.
So the main thing to take from that, because I don't care about his threats, they're not going to quit fighting. They've been fighting since before the Soviets were there. So that was in, 79? So you're basically talking at least 50 years. And it goes back further than that. And it goes back further than that. No country successfully taken and held on to Afghanistan for any extended period of time. Unless you're going to stay there indefinitely, they're going to keep fighting. Also, this is one thing, probably one of the few things, that former President Trump, current President Biden, myself, Hardwood and Sock, my conservative chatter, and most of the folks that are in this chat agree on. It's time for us to leave. Now, there's a few things we need to make sure of on our exit, in my opinion. Number one, if we're leaving these bases and supplies, equipment, vehicles, weapons, stuff like that behind, which I understand because moving a vehicle is heavy and takes a lot of times more than it's worth to get it out of there, right? We should at least be handing it over to our allies, making sure they're aware when the transition is going to take place. The local population that has supported us for the 20 years that we've been there, or at least not openly fought us. If we don't want to hand it over to them because we don't consider them allies for whatever reason, maybe there's intelligence that I don't know about, then let's sabotage or destroy these vehicles and equipment, et cetera, on the way out the door. Number two, my opinion. Anybody who supported us, translators, worked with the United States military, worked with United States diplomats, et cetera, that wants to leave and immigrate to the United States should be able to do so. Not 2 years from now, not 5 years from now. Now. If we did enough of a security clearance on somebody that they could work as a translator for the United States military and know where our soldiers are, then I'm fine with getting them the hell over here. I don't need to wait 6 months, 2 years, 5 years to get those people that put their lives on the line with our soldiers out of harm's way. If they were willing to risk their life to help the United States, then I'm fine with them coming over here. It's the least we can do. And that's one thing that's been being missed. Hardwood and sock, now we just need to get out of Iraq and Syria, but then where will we fight our proxy wars? I don't think we should have ever gone into Iraq in the first place. Agree with you there. Syria is a total mess. We helped destabilize that region by going into Iraq in the first place. I do feel some responsibility there. I think we need to be a lot more selective about where we send our soldiers and what the mission is, what the exit strategy is. Having been in Afghanistan for 20 years now, and pretty much the whole time saying we're not doing the nation building thing, I think it's very clear that when we went in, nobody was anticipating a 20-year stay. That's not an exit strategy. Welcome back, Dash Mickey. Past that, that's all I've really got to say on Afghanistan and us withdrawing. So if anybody has any questions on what I think on whatever subject, feel free to fire away. And if you don't, we'll wrap up here in the next few minutes. We'll take a couple-minute break. I'm going to go get some coffee while y'all think of some questions. And then I'll be right back. Welcome back. A little bit early, but coffee got ready a little bit faster than I expected. Catch up on chat. Banana Raptor God, I think Syria is a valid cause to fight for, given the Kurds in that area have been fucked for decades. Yes, they have. They also allied with us during our invasion of Iraq. I don't think it's why we're in Syria, but it's good that the Kurds have their ability to have their own government. Also, we will probably look into in Asia for future military conflicts, given the island chains China is setting up. Middle East will move lower in priority. We will still be in the Middle East, but not as much activity. I tend to agree with all of that, Banana Raptor. I think China is very much rattling the sabers over in the Southeast Asian Pacific. We're doing a lot of called rights of navigation for those who are unaware, where basically China will say, we consider these our territorial waters now, and we will send a U.S. Navy fleet through it anyway and say, no, they're still international waters. Probably do an episode here on China coming up. I also think if we'll ever start taking climate change seriously and moving away from fossil fuels and developing some serious green energy technology and economy and industry, that we'll see a lot of our motivations for going into the Middle East removed. And since I always forget to do this because I'm terrible at self-promotion, if you're enjoying the content, please like, follow, subscribe, depending on whichever platform you're on. We're live every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. Sometimes we run over. You can also, if there's anything in specific that you want to talk about, phone number's toll free. Open to calls about this episode and last week's episode. If you have any sources that you want to present, like say you disagreed with me last week and you want to go over them this Sunday and you want to send those in, you can go to the website, theleftspeaks.com. You can find all the contact information and send me those sources. As long as they're legitimate, it's not daily storm or neo-Nazi stuff that's going to violate Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch's terms of service, I'll be happy to bring it up when you call in. We'll give it about 2 more minutes for any questions or comments. Then we're going to wrap up the show unless we can jump into another subject, guys. I appreciate you all being here, guys and gals. And Hardwood and Sock, if you're there, man, I hope your streams have been going well. I appreciate you being here. I feel kind of like I helped give you a start and a platform to begin with. Banana Raptor God, are you on any other time than Sunday? No, I travel Monday through Friday. So if you miss an episode, you can always catch it at the website. It's uploaded. There are 2 seasons going back. I think I'm up to like 50 shows now, give or take. They're separated on specific individual policies or what's going on at the time. So if you want to look into my opinion on voting rights or voter fraud or the insurrection attempt, all of that stuff, every episode is pretty much self-contained. There's also a playlist of viewer calls from every viewer who has ever called in. They're all up. How do I feel about the cyber attacks between us and Russia from Dash Mickey since we're on foreign policy? I think it's the new version of the Cold War. I think Vladimir Putin, the prime minister or leader of the Soviet or former Soviet Union of Russia, is very much testing and pushing to see what he can get away with. And just like any dictator, there has to be consequences to put him back in his place. He will continue to push that line to make sure that that line is real. I know President Biden recently, when they had their summit in, I believe it was Geneva, told him that, these critical infrastructure areas in the United States are off limits from any kind of attack. And if you attack us with cyber warfare in those areas, there will be a form of retaliation. I know that they have codes in our power grid. We have codes in their power grid. But I think that's where the new Cold War is, essentially. Do I feel if Biden's response is lacking thus far, but we don't know what all Biden is doing because it wouldn't necessarily have been publicized. But yes, there needs to be some kind of response beyond, if you touch this, we'll swing back, in my opinion. That being said, I understand not wanting to escalate any further, but it takes two to play by that set of rules. And if Vladimir Putin isn't going to de-escalate, he's going to keep letting these cyber attacks happen or encouraging them, then you're going to have to respond or they will continue. Banana Raptor God, I imagine most of what we would actually do would be hidden for obvious reasons. I agree. I normally don't go with the whole, oh, we're doing super secret stuff. But in this particular instance, I can see a lot of it being kept from public view. Especially with the cyber stuff. Yeah. But I do think you're going to have to make some, since the attacks have been public and are out, and, the American population knows, you're going to have to make some public declaration of what you did in response, right? Otherwise, it just looks like you're taking punches to the face all day, which is only going to encourage others to swing at you. I fear that with our society revolved around technology, that cyber attacks is what will affect us the most. From Dash Mickey. So we've got a few things going against us in the cyber attack realm. Since we were one of the first nations to really, get huge into computers and internet and all that kind of stuff, a lot of our infrastructure is not extremely secured. Got a lot of old stuff that has loopholes and stuff, before people were concerned really about viruses and things like that and cyber attacks, right? Also, we've got 50 different states operating by 50 different sets of rules, and there's a lot of potential weaknesses and holes. It's also an easy way to attack the United States and do a good amount of damage that to date has not led to the United States sending its army knocking on your doorstep. And to date, that we are aware of, again, there may be top secret classified, counter operations that we don't know about, but I can't take those into consideration, has not led to much of a response by the United States. So that's what I'm saying. At this point, there needs to be some kind of public response to deter this stuff. It can't just be, it can't continue to be, oh, we're going to respond someday. Oh, we're going to respond someday. Oh, we're going to respond someday. Because if the whole world's a stage, then everybody's watching Russia just punch you in the face, punch you in the face, punch you in the face, and you don't do anything. Well, you end up being the kid in school that gets bullied and never stands up for himself. All the other kids start, jumping on you too. I don't want to escalate this any further either, but It takes two not to fight. Hockey puck 33. At this point, Taliban won. It's over. I don't know that the Taliban has won. I think they have certainly outlasted us, but our designated mission going in wasn't to build Afghanistan into a Western democracy, even though that's essentially what we ended up trying to do. Our goal going in was to get Al-Qaeda, to deny them the use of Afghanistan, and to get Osama bin Laden. We got Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda moved mostly out of Afghanistan. It's time to come home. It was time to come home 10 years ago. Hockey puck 33, they are taking over. They've been controlling 15 provinces for quite some time, and half the rest of them are contested. So they're not taking over. They've already controlled quite a chunk of Afghanistan for quite some time. Hell, that goes all the way back to Bush. Then we surged troops under Obama, and when the surge went away, it came right back. So Taliban's never really gone away. When we first went in, before we invaded Iraq, we shoved them to the mountainous regions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But past that, they've been there. From Banana Raptor God, got to remember our mission objectives. Correct, which I think we lost track of. Unless your plan is to make Afghanistan a 51st state, which let's make DC the 51st state before that, it's been time to come home. Hockey puck 33. So you were for pulling out of the Middle East. I'm for pulling out of Afghanistan. Every individual place is going to have an individual opinion. It also means what you mean by pulling out. Do I want boots on the ground, full invading Iraq, for instance? No, I don't. I don't know that they will, to be honest with you. If they end up isolated by themselves, which is, unless the Afghani people step up and fight back, is what's going to happen, then I don't see an urban area just surviving by itself with the Taliban controlling the entire countryside. Make Puerto Rico the 51st state or the 52nd if Puerto Rico wants it. So if you go check out the episode on DC as a state, I'm fine with Puerto Rico being a state, but polling in Puerto Rico tends to go back and forth both ways. It's not as decisive as it is in Washington, D.C. Hockey puck 33, Iraq and Afghanistan mostly was what you were asking about pulling out. Yeah, I'm fine with pulling out of Afghanistan. Like I said, we'll keep an embassy there, sure, but 20 years is enough of a commitment. More than enough. And our mission objectives have been fulfilled for quite some time. Honestly, in my opinion, when we got Osama bin Laden, we should have pulled out at that point in time. Mission accomplished. Let's go home. Anybody who helped us, if you were a translator, if you were a diplomat, if you were whatever from Afghanistan, if you want to come and your family wants to come to America, you can come. Past that, Afghani people, if you want to, keep a Western style democracy, you got to fight for it, same as we fought for it. Government of Afghanistan is a valid reason, IMO. Just not having the Taliban be the central is a good reason, but that's just you. From Dash Mickey, there's no reason for us to say anymore. Banana Raptor God, you think you're in a minority on that opinion? I would agree that you're in a minority on that opinion. I understand where you're coming from. I really do. I don't want to see, I don't want to see a friendly government fall. How many friendly governments are you willing to extend this to, would be my question. And if not, why, if not others, if not all others, what makes Afghanistan different? And then how many U.S. soldiers' lives are you willing to put on the line to defend that government? If the polling is correct and 85% of the Afghani population has no sympathy for the Taliban, doesn't want them in charge, then 85% of the Afghani population should be able to hold off 15% of the Taliban. Hockey puck, you should guard that embassy very carefully. I agree. But that doesn't mean you need to lock down an entire country. Dash Mickey, we can't fight every non-industrial country's fight. I don't disagree. Like I said, how many countries do you want to go in to put in friendly governments is the question you end up having to ask yourself. Hockey puck, 15% of Taliban is armed and trained. I don't know that it's 15% of the Taliban. The polling I'm referring to specifically says that of the Afghani population, 85% of all of Afghanistan has no sympathy for the Taliban. Now you can get into questions on what the methodology on that polling was, right? Maybe they just said, oh, hey, this is a U.S. sponsored poll or an English sponsored poll. Maybe we should answer the way they want us to, right? I don't know. But going off the information that I have, 15% of the country is sympathetic towards the Taliban. If that's the case, then the 85%, if they're willing to fight, should be able to keep control of their country. The Afghan ANA and security forces are also well-trained. Okay, yeah, well-trained from Banana Raptor God. We've heard this before with the ARVN, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. We fully equipped them, trained them, left after, 10, 12 years in Vietnam with a peace treaty similar to what we're doing here. I'm afraid history is going to repeat itself again. I mean, very similar. We went into a country. The time for silence is over. Bleaka Social, thank you for the follow. I appreciate you being here. Anybody else that hasn't clicked that follow button yet, even if you are not a progressive, you are more than welcome to join the conversation. I appreciate it. The situations are very similar. We went into a non-industrial country, established or propped up a democracy that was very, very young, had a lot of problems with corruption, both in Vietnam, with the country we were supporting, and in Afghanistan. Very little infrastructure outside of the urban areas, right, outside of the cities. Population in both cases that didn't really know why the hell we were there outside of, the people immediately around the soldiers. As we saw in Afghanistan, 92% of the male population of Afghanistan had no idea what September 11th was or that was the motivation for the United States being in Afghanistan. If you go to Vietnam, out in these rural villages, you would have farmers who thought that the United States soldiers were still French soldiers from when they had been a colony of France. So in both cases, we did a piss poor job of explaining to the populations why we were there. Hockey Puck, thank you for the silence is over. For those of y'all who are new to the show, every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific. So you might want to hit the notification bell because I'm not a regular streamer. This is more of a show than a stream. It's not like an every night thing. Once a week for 2 to 3 hours, depending on how engaged chat is at the end, we'll go into one topic in depth. Phone lines are always open whenever I'm live. They're toll free, 855-915-5338. I got phone lines instead of Discord, so if you've got the uncle that disagrees with me, you can hand him the damn phone, and he can say what he needs to say. I do limit discussion to this week's topic and last week's topic. So if you disagree with me right now about Afghanistan, for instance, and you want to get your sources together, You can call next week. Hell, you can even send them to me. Get all the contact information at the website, theleftspeaks.com, and I'll bring them up on stream for you next show so you can present your case. Hockey Puck, it is amazing how training extreme fundamentalist backfires. I agree. For those who are not aware, he's referring to the fact that we trained the Taliban, essentially, to fight the Soviets when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in '79. Banana Raptor God, I'll take the stance that Afghanistan will fight back, but I'm super biased in this field. I am more involved in Afghanistan than 99% of anyone. I hope they will fight back. I think there will be a portion of the population that fights back, just as there was in Vietnam. I hope South Vietnam does not repeat itself. The parallels between the two are what concerns me, but I'm not making a prediction on which way it's going to go. Bleak is social, but the population asks the United States to be there. The population of Vietnam or of Afghanistan? Banana Raptor God, I'll be here next Sunday. I enjoy the stream overall. I appreciate you being here. I really do, sincerely. Banana Raptor God, most of Twitch is awful with this kind of stuff. I tend to agree with you. There's the internet, in my experience, tends to drive that. Controversy, hot takes, conflict, it drives clicks. If you go look at my calls with viewers, I have predominantly conservatives that have called in. All of them are up on YouTube. Hardwood and Sock, who was in here earlier, is conservative, has called in multiple times. Very civil conversations. We make a lot of progress talking to each other. The one call I have where I had to use the mute button that I have, where the guy came in hot and just wanted to scream and holler and, you know, call me every name in the book and that sort of stuff, that has the most views out of anything I've got up, unfortunately. I consider it my least productive call. But I'm not here for the views or donations or anything like that. I don't even have donations enabled, right? I'm here to have the conversation. I think we need to get to where we're talking to each other again across the aisle, instead of listening to the people screaming out the hot takes, instead of, you know, getting our information about what conservatives think or what liberals think or what progressives think or what socialists think. Let's talk to each other and find out what that person thinks, instead of listening to some talking head tell us what the other person thinks. Blika, both. So Afghanistan, the vast majority of people that we polled were in support of us when we got there. But we didn't go in to create a democracy. We went in to get Osama bin Laden and to get the terrorist camps after September the 11th. I think the vast majority of the population in Afghanistan, 92% of the male population doesn't even know why the hell we're there in the first place. So if you'd asked them before we showed up if they wanted us there, you would have probably found some that said yes, because the idea of Western democracy sounds good, right? Any woman who wanted an education that wasn't allowed to get one under the Taliban, for instance, or didn't want to wear, you know, Islamic clothing, burqas and such, would probably have been in favor of it. But it's not like we did polling before we went in. I mean, we established a democracy over there within the first 3 years. We established a Afghani constitution, that sort of stuff. I'm in favor of democracy and constitutions. I mean, don't mistake me, but you're talking about a huge culture shift. So imagine, as I mentioned earlier in the show, if some foreign country came over here and instituted Islamic law and Islamic theocracy, or hell, even Christian theocracy in whatever state you live in, and you didn't know why they were there. They just showed up someday. Okay. Even if there are some things that are good that you like the changes they're making, there's still going to be a lot of backlash, because you're talking about changing the entire culture of that area, whatever it is, right? Hell, you can see that now. If you go out in the rural areas of this country and you start mentioning gun reform, I can't tell you. I grew up in Louisiana, and I can't tell you how many people are like, you're going to have to, pry my gun from my cold, dead hands, right? So changing a culture that massively is not an easy thing to do. Now, does a large portion of the Afghaani population still want us there? Sure, absolutely. But after 20 years, I think we've made enough of an investment. I think we've made too much of an investment. It's time to bring our boys back home. As for Vietnam, the rural areas of Vietnam, they, in a lot of cases, didn't really. So you had the urban and rural divide in Vietnam, okay? Talking about South Vietnam here. And the South Vietnamese government was extremely corrupt. Democratic, but extremely corrupt. So a lot of the benefits of Western democracy and, capitalism and that sort of stuff and U.S. aid didn't get out to the average person who was working in a rural environment. You had a large part of the population that was in favor of the United States being there. You had a large population, or a large part of the population, that didn't want the United States there. And you had a large part of the population that didn't really give a shit. They just wanted both sides to quit fighting and go away so they could get back to farming, right? Similar circumstances. If if a huge part of the population doesn't even know why you're there, you're going to be fighting uphill. Hockey Puck 33, how do you see the position of Iran in this matter? I don't know how much Iran's going to feed into Afghanistan. I think they'll try and use the United States withdrawal as a lot of propaganda, but Iran has a lot of internal problems that they use the United States to take focus away from. I know things are bad here, but look at that bad guy over there, the great devil over there. Don't worry about stuff here. Just focus on the bad guy over there, right? So I don't see Iran like going and trying to take over Afghanistan, if that's your question. Banana Raptor God, have you watched any Dylan Burns? He's on Twitch briefly, just a few things here and there. Banana Raptor God, also side note, have you read the Asia Foundation survey the Asian Foundation did in 2020? It's a good read. If not, I'm assuming it's got lots of information. It's a survey done in Afghanistan. No, I don't think I have. I might have. I read a ton of stuff, but I don't remember that one specifically. All right, guys and gals, we got about 13 minutes left, and then I'm going to call it for the day. So get in your final questions if you got any. Anything goes right now. As long as it doesn't violate terms of service, obviously. Going once. Going twice. Sold. That's going to wrap us up for today, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in. If you want to catch previous episodes, find my views on any topics, the website, theleftspeaks.com, it's all there. Okay. You can also follow me on Twitter if you want to send anything to me. You can see the links. Oh, I got them up here now. Okay. And past that, it is lunchtime. My moderator is correct. Thank you, everybody. We're going to roll an exit trailer, and then I hope to see you next week, every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific. Thank you again for being here. And if you haven't followed, like, subscribe, please do so. The time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition.